Legend of Total War here, and today we're going to be doing another top 5 Total War video, this time covering the top 5 best factions, which was the top comment posted by Goulash on the top 5 worst Total War games video. But before we get started on that, we do need to clarify what the criteria is going to be for what I'm going to judge these factions on. Each faction, each Total War game can only basically contribute one faction. So there's not going to be like 3 factions from one Total War game. And of course I'm just picking 5 of the Total War games, and I've picked 5 factions that fit this criteria, I think. How strong their starting position is, so how strong they are against invasion, how likely they are to dominate even if they're played by the AI, how easy they are to play for newer players, how rich they are, and how strong their army potential is. So those are the sort of considerations for the top 5 factions. Now before I get started on the number 5 slot, I do want to mention a Total War sale that's going on over at ChronoGG, of which I've just become affiliate. There'll be a link in the description and in the comments. But here's the deal. So if you haven't got these games yet, now's a good opportunity for you to do so if it was on your to-do list. So Total War Warhammer 2 is going to be 45% off at $33.25. Total War Warhammer 1 is 79% off at $12. Total War Attila is 78% off at $10. Total War Rome 2 is 72% off at $17. And Shogun 2 is Shogun 2 Collection is 76% off at $12. So if you haven't picked up those games yet and want to, ChronoGG is an option for you. Anyway, let's get on to the number 5 slot. The number 5 slot, to me, goes to Empire Total Wars Great Britain. In my opinion, this is by far the easiest faction to play in this game. Its starting location is almost unassailable. The AI rarely invade, and if they do, you can usually pretty easily throw them back into the sea. They have potentially the strongest fleet, they've got a really good army, and their mission, which is to incorporate the 13 colonies, is one of the best out of any of the playable factions. I've only played a few factions in this game, but from my experience, Great Britain by far is the easiest. So now let's move on to the number 4 slot. The number 4 slot, in my opinion, has to go to Medieval 2's the Turks. Now this one's a little bit of it's mixed because its faction is not as easy to play for newer players. However, its starting location is one of the easiest out of any of the other factions in this game because it's pretty isolated. You're free to take on rebels at your disposal, or if you want, and simultaneously if you want to as well, take out the richest city in the world pretty easily very early on, which is Byzantium. They have virtually no natural enemies apart from Byzantium, which are very easy to deal with. They have a potential ally in the south, or you can capture Jerusalem, which is arguably as well the most valuable city in the game due to the plus 15% extra public order bonus global faction wide, which is really useful. In addition to that, they have, of all the factions that are playable, the strongest starting roster, having access to 3 different units of horse archers in the early game, not to mention a huge variety of mercenaries. Turks oftentimes are the real dominators of the campaign, so that's why I'm giving it the number 4 slot. Now, just a bit of a honourable mention, this one was very closely followed by England. Now, England's starting position is again really strong, very good for easy players, for newer players, easy faction to players. However, the main reason why they fall short to the Turks, I think, is that the Turks have the jihad mechanic as opposed to the crusade mechanic, which is more powerful because you don't have to deal with the Pope. As the Turks, you can attack other Muslim nations and not have to worry about excommunication, and you don't need to worry about approval from anyone else to call a jihad. So you can just call a jihad whenever you want, on whatever you want, without having to worry about the Pope. And that is one of the things that sets it aside from England. But if it wasn't for that, England probably would have taken the top slot. Anyway, let's move on to the number 3 slot. The number 3 slot goes to Shogun 2's Clan Oda, which I don't think needs a whole lot of explanation as to why they are the most powerful faction in this game, or the best faction. It purely comes down to their Ashigaru, which are, generally speaking, the most cost efficient and some of the best units in the game, even though they're basically just peasants. They have Ashigaru that are not only cheaper than every other factions, but are actually better than other factions as well, giving them a huge bonus in the starting position, allowing them to expand very quickly, or if they don't want to expand quickly, allow you just to pummel everyone that decides to attack you. So out of all the factions that I've played in Shogun 2, the Clan Oda comes across as, especially at the start of the campaign, not necessarily at the end, as the strongest faction, purely just because of their overpowered Ashigaru, especially the Yari Ashigaru, which, as you guys know, are just, in Spear Wall, are very strong to attack head-on. Anyway, now let's move on to the number 2 slot. In my opinion, the number 2 slot has to go to Rome Total War's faction, Romans in general, but specifically the Brutii. Their starting position is slightly better than everyone else's of the Roman faction due to richer settlements and also closest access to all of the wonders. When taking into consideration the Julii and Scipii, whilst the Scipii do have access to attack Carthage down here, which is a very rich city, arguably one of the richest, and also Sicily, it doesn't really have much else down here of any real value, whereas the Brutii have access to a shitload of territories in Greece, then Anatolia, not to mention the Statue of Zeus, the Temple of Artemis, and the Mausoleum at Halicarnassus, and also Colossus of Rhodes. Getting all of those in the early game make it, in my opinion, a cut above the rest. And when it comes to the Julii, they've only got Gaul to go on. I would say that in terms of the strongest military, the Julii are right up there. Well, actually, they're the best when it comes to public order. The military might of the Scipio, but the overall wealth and just the conquest potential of the Brutii makes them just slightly better than the other Roman factions, in my personal opinion. So that's why they've got the number 2 slot as the second best faction across a Total War game. Now let's move on to the best faction in a Total War game, which I'm sure none of you are expecting. Anyway, let's move on to the number 1 slot. So, the number 1 slot. What game is it going to be for? What faction is it going to be for, and why? Well, this game, believe it or not, is Total War Attila. I bet you didn't expect me to give this one the number 1 slot, but this faction is, in my opinion, the most overpowered faction in a Total War game by far. This faction is so powerful that in multiplayer, which I'm not taking into consideration for this, I have never lost a battle with this faction, and I would consider its campaign, once you get started, is one of the easiest campaigns you can ever play. Whilst, of course, you have to understand how they're played, so it's definitely not new player friendly. Once you understand one thing about this faction, you will never ever lose a single battle because it is so overpowered it's not funny. It has the best unit of the best class in this campaign that doesn't compete with, no other unit can compete with it, and it's the sole reason why this faction is so overpowered. It is so powerful, this unit, that it doesn't play into the rock, paper, scissors equation, you know, spears beat cavalry, cavalry beat archers, archers beat horse archers. This unit beats anything. One-on-one, it can beat an elephant, it can beat a legionary, it can beat anything. It can beat anything of its own class, it can beat a heavy cavalry, light cavalry, anything, because it's also not particularly expensive. So what unit is it? It's the Spetzion Archers as the White Huns. So they get the number 1 slot as the best faction in Total War Attila. Not just the best faction in Total War Attila, but across any Total War title. This is, and I stake my entire reputation on it, this is the most overpowered faction you will ever come across. And just to give you an idea, I've set up a custom battle here, up against the Sassanids. And I'm just going up against the AI, but I'll show you why these guys are unstoppable. Now, it's not shown here on the status, but they have 70% missile block ratio. Now, for horse archers, that is absurd. These guys are basically able to shoot whilst being in testudo simultaneously. Now, I have gone up against this army before and beaten it, but the only way, in my opinion, to beat this is if you know for a fact that they're going to bring this exact army, and you bring a direct counter for it, which, even then, it's kind of difficult. So, let's go in. I'm actually going to do a battle in a top 5 video. And this battle is going to be an absolute breeze. So this isn't part of the campaign or anything like that. I'm not going to start up a campaign just to set this one up. But I'm going to fight a battle here against a defensive Sassanid force. They've got an auto-generated army. But it's not just about the fact that we're going to win it, but we're going to win it well. So the reason, I mean, I really can't stress enough just how overpowered these units are. First thing we do with them, because this is the thing, this is a game where attacking is very important. Horse archers dominate the battlefield, so you get to dictate the terms of the fight. They've got heaps of ammunition, and the thing is, even once you've run out of ammo, these guys here can fight pretty damn well in melee. So what you want to be doing with them is taking out the enemy general as soon as possible, but generally go like this. Take out the enemy cavalry first, because they're the ones that will compete with you in melee. And if you're thinking, oh, why don't you just spam light cavalry to chase them? Here's the thing. Like I've said, this unit here will beat anything one-on-one. Anything. Because if it can catch it, it can't beat it in melee. Light cavalry can't beat it in melee. It's too strong. Not to mention, even if it gets just one volley off, it'll just wreck you. Archers can't beat it, because if you go into melee with them, it'll defeat any archer unit. Spearmen can't get them because they just can't catch them, and you can shoot off loads of volleys before they get a chance to do anything. Heavy cavalry can't catch them. So yeah, basically, if a unit can catch it, it can't beat it in melee. And if it can't catch it, well, it's screwed anyway then, because you just shoot it. So as you can see here, they just can't do anything about it. Not the best army, like I said, it's an auto-generated. We have to assume that this is like what it would be like on the campaign. But anyway, it's not the point of winning, but how well we'll win. In terms of like a custom battle, they've used up the same amount of money as we have. Just gotta try and switch. If they start to get close, speed up, and it'll never catch you. It's got whistle shot as well, so once you've killed the enemy general, you can just make the entire army flee pretty much instantly. Now they've been shooting at us, and we've barely lost a thing. Although sometimes you do take a little bit of friendly fire, but that's just part of Total War Attila. I guess the main weakness of this faction is that you do need to be good with how to use cavalry. But that's the thing with Total War Attila. Every faction you need to have cavalry, unless you want to auto-resolve every battle, which, don't get me wrong, it's totally viable. I can speed this up a bit. So yeah, get into a skirmish with them, and they just can't compete. You can see they're shooting at us, but they're not doing any damage. They can't do any damage. We have 70% missile block chance. So we could charge in over here, but they've got other melee units. Now that's not to say that these guys are so overpowered that they can go charging headfirst into spearmen right away. You can't do that. Not yet. You can see we've barely taken any casualties. Now, if you've watched my White Hun campaign that I did on YouTube, I didn't lose a single... I'm pretty sure I didn't lose a single battle. And I went up against the odds multiple times. Like, one army up against 3 or 4 armies. You know, going up against probably the second strongest faction in the game, the Sassanids. That's one of the things that also makes them a little bit weaker, is that they do have to go up against just one of the toughest factions that you can go up against in this, just right off the bat. And that's where I think a lot of people would fail when it comes to this faction. But the thing is, with this game, every faction is difficult in one way or another, if you don't know how to play it. This game is pretty unforgiving when it comes to that sort of stuff. Okay. We don't want to use, don't use archers up against, don't use shots up against this. We want to be shooting them. So these here are immortals. I gotta get in there, kill that enemy general. And the thing is as well, I've gone up against players. Like I said, I've never lost a battle with this army here. Not once. I've gone up against players that have said, oh yeah, it doesn't seem that overpowered. And then they've gone up against me, and then they're like, oh my god, this faction is unbelievably overpowered. Okay, looks like we'll get the enemy general. And they've isolated their infantry there. But I've gone to get up against people that were top ranked on this game and the leaderboard with this army here and stomped them. By far the most powerful faction.
Their general is dead. A lethal blow.
Now all we need is a bit of whistle shot with one of them. Heavy shot with the rest. So really, if this was also a top 5 unit video, this would get the top slot, in my opinion. Most overpowered unit in a Total War game that was never patched. And I don't think Total War Attila is going to get any more patches, so they remain to be the most powerful unit in the game. Because you can get them fairly early on as well. They're not super expensive. They're only ranked as a tier 2 unit. But in my opinion, this is the only unit in the game that should be a tier 4 unit. It's so powerful. Because nothing can beat it. I mean, as long as you don't be stupid about it, obviously. It requires tactics. But their just pure potential is so absurd that even in sieges, I've managed to win against walls with these guys. It is a lot harder, though, to do that. We're almost at the end of the battle. And of course, I feel like wiping out the enemy army. Just to really drive home the point of just how powerful these guys are. See, Immortals can't do anything to us. Didn't even need to use my general, but I just would go with the cheap type. I suppose the real difficulty of this would be when you are completely overwhelmed with numbers. It can get difficult to use, but with a bit of practice, it's just unbelievably overpowered. And the White Huns, in terms of a horde mechanic, which is very useful in Total War Attila because having lots of settlements causes corruptions and whatnot, their horde mechanics are quite powerful. Now, we're going to run out of ammunition soon, because I wasn't super conservative. Like, I'm not going to sit here and show off and say, this is me being the best I could possibly play. Not really. But we're going to go into melee against Immortals soon, and we're going to beat them. I know we outnumber them. That's the only unit that took any real damage. Oh, I don't need to go into melee. Don't need to. Now, of course, on the campaign map, you want to focus on getting as much ammunition for these guys as possible. The more ammo you have, the more they can slaughter, because no one can touch you. They have the fastest, well, one of the fastest speeds in the game. But anyone that can catch you, like I said, they have to have like 100 speed in order to catch you. You've got rapid advance here, which can boost your speed up to 135. Now, other units do have that. But anything that can have that will not beat them in melee. Especially if you get a few volleys off on them first. So I lost 38 men, and they lost pretty much everything. So that's why the Huns for the White Huns for Total War Attila get the #1 slot. The White Huns absolutely destroy the regular Huns, and that's why they get the #1 slot. Anyway, so once again, top comments in terms of a suggestion of a top 5 video. That's what we'll do next. Until then, I'll see you next time, fuckers.